Family Guy debuted in 1999, and from the very first episode, it made clear that this wasn't going to be a traditional sitcom. With absurd cutaways, crude humor, and a very dysfunctional family at the center, the show set itself apart immediately. This episode begins with Peter promising Lois that he won't drink at a bachelor party. And of course, he immediately breaks that promise, then gets drunk and passes out at work the next day. Unfortunately, Peter's job is as a safety inspector at a toy factory. His negligence lets dangerous products slip through, and I am talking about Axe on a Bat, if you know what I mean. Now moving forward, with all this chaos, Peter is quickly fired.
Ah, jeez, for how long?
Instead of coming clean to Lois, Peter lies, and with Brian's encouragement, he applies for welfare. What should have been a modest check turns into a bureaucratic disaster. The government sends him a massive payout. Peter uses the money to live extravagantly. I'm talking from getting Meg her lips injection, which she has been asking all episode, and Chris being lucky to get a taste of Peter's sudden wealth with the purchase of a breast implant, and also buying random things such as the statue of David, hiring out a jester for Lois, and owning a mini boat. But Lois did eventually found out. They have been living on welfare funds.
The man I married would never think he could fix a problem just by spending money.
And in a misguided attempt to fix everything, Peter tries to return the money to taxpayers by dumping it out of a blimp at the Super Bowl. Unsurprisingly, this lands him in court for welfare fraud. And in true Family Guy fashion, Peter is saved by the least likely character, Stewie, who uses a mind control device on the judge. In the end, Peter is free, and somehow he even gets his job back. And talking about Stewie, the toddler had a significant role in this episode, as he was introduced immediately as more than just a baby. From the very first episode, he's established as a child prodigy with adult intelligence, a British accent, and a flair for villainy, with his master plan of building the mind-controlling device. This is important because the writers waste no time showing the audience that Stewie is a standout character with a distinct comedic voice.
Damn you, vile woman! You've impeded my work since the day I escaped from your wretched womb.
While the main plot follows Peter's job loss, welfare fraud, and trial, Stewie's role is small but crucial, as at the very end, when Peter is about to be punished in court, Stewie secretly uses his invention to manipulate the judge into freeing Peter. Without Stewie, Peter's arc would have ended as a failure, so even in the plot, Stewie gets short but sharp moments that highlight his eccentric personality and functions as an ex machina to resolve the story. Now let's talk about the tone and humor of this episode, because that's really where Family Guy makes its mark right from the start. The overall tone of Death Has a Shadow is irreverent and satirical. Nothing is off limits, and nothing is treated with too much seriousness. The writers takes everyday issues like unemployment, government benefits, and family responsibility and push them to absurd extremes. For example, Peter falling asleep at work and getting fired is relatable.
Your negligence has damaged this company's reputation. You're fired!
But it quickly spirals into him collecting thousands in welfare checks and literally dumping the money from a blimp. That balance of real-world problems with cartoon logic defines the show's chaotic energy. There's also a dark but playful undercurrent running through the episode. Stewie, in particular, brings this out. He's not just a cute baby. He's an evil genius building weapons of mass destruction. His presence adds a sinister edge, but because it's played so over the top, it stays funny instead of disturbing. The character-driven humor is also on full display. Peter's cluelessness creates most of the central conflict as the bumbling dad who constantly makes bad decisions. Lois, who plays the straight character, constantly frustrated, but trying to hold the family together and balancing Peter's antics. Now moving on to Brian, who brings in sarcastic commentary and a voice of reason.
Peter, you can't keep lying to her about losing your job. Sooner or later, she's going to find out.
And of course, Stewie is like a parody of a Bond villain trapped in a baby's body, which adds a surreal twist that makes him instantly memorable. Then Meg and Chris had an underdeveloped role early on. Now let's take a look at the themes and social commentary in this episode, because underneath all the cutaway gags and absurd comedy, there's actually a lot being said about everyday life. The first big theme is irresponsibility and consequences. Peter makes bad choices at every turn. He falls asleep at work, lies to Lois about getting fired, and then abuses the welfare system when he suddenly starts receiving way too much money. The comedy exaggerates these mistakes, but it also shows how quickly one person's irresponsibility can spiral out of control. Of course, this being Family Guy, Peter never truly faces the fallout, because Stewie swoops in with his mind control device to save him. That undercutting of consequences is itself part of the show's DNA. Now, another clear theme is government incompetence. The fact that Peter accidentally gets a welfare check for $150,000 a week is obviously unrealistic, but it's meant as satire. It's poking fun at bureaucracy and the idea that government systems are so broken they could make massive errors without noticing. The image of Peter literally raining money down on the city from a blimp takes this satire to cartoonish levels, but the point is clear: institutions aren't always as efficient as we expect. The show also plays with the idea of the dysfunctional nuclear family. On the outside, the Griffins look like a traditional American sitcom family, but inside, they're far from it. The dad is reckless, the mom is constantly exasperated, the dog is more rational than the humans, and the baby is secretly plotting world domination. It's a parody of the classic wholesome family sitcoms, flipping the formula on its head. And finally, the courtroom scene highlights authority and manipulation. Instead of justice being served fairly, Stewie literally bends the judge's will with his invention. It's a funny gag, but also a tongue-in-cheek way of saying that power often outweighs truth. So in short, the themes in Death Has a Shadow revolve around irresponsibility, government satire, family dysfunction, and the arbitrariness of authority. But the key is that the show never moralizes, it laughs at these ideas instead of trying to solve them, which is what makes Family Guy so different from other animated sitcoms. So now let's break down what holds up and what doesn't about this pilot episode. Starting with the positives, what really holds up is the way the show introduces its characters. Even in this very first outing, Peter is the bumbling dad, Lois is the voice of reason, Stewie is the evil genius baby, and Brian is the sarcastic intellectual. Those roles are crystal clear, and they still feel consistent with who these characters are today. And Stewie's debut in particular is a standout. His very first appearance with the mind control device instantly defines him as one of the most unique characters in adult animation. That baby Bond villain persona is just as funny and memorable now as it was in 1999. Another thing that holds up is the humor style. We see the early use of cutaway gags, which would go on to become the show's signature. They're not quite as polished yet, but the DNA is there. And the welfare storyline works as a piece of satire, exaggerating government incompetence and poking fun at bureaucracy in a way that still feels sharp today. On the other hand, some parts don't hold up as well. The animation is probably the most obvious. Compared to later seasons, the first episode looks stiff and off-model, almost like a prototype of the show we know. The pacing is also slower. Jokes sometimes linger too long instead of snapping quickly like later episodes would. Peter's character is another weak spot. Here he feels more selfish and careless than funny, which makes him harder to root for. The show would later find a better balance where Peter's stupidity is endearing instead of just reckless. And Lois, unfortunately, doesn't get much depth in the pilot. She's mostly stuck in the role of the nagging wife, which feels dated and underdeveloped by today's standards. So what do you think? Did Family Guy's first episode hold up for you? Or does it feel too rough compared to later seasons? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into classic TV episodes.